Well, good evening, and welcome to the Library of Congress, and to everyone here in our Jefferson building and through our live stream. And a special welcome tonight to our Library of Congress Alumni Network members who are with us tonight. Collectively, they have given nearly 1,000 years of service. So could we give them a hand? Now, a lot has happened since I first welcomed our 24th U.S. Poet Laureate, Ada Limón, onto this very stage. She has accomplished so much and received so many honors, including the Genius Grant, the MacArthur, just have to say. For her work. And here we are at another milestone moment to celebrate two history-making beginnings. And before I talk about them, though, this is a late-breaking favor that I have to ask you. As you may know, last year, Ada participated in NASA's Message in a Bottle campaign for the Europa Clipper mission, and more than 2.6 million people signed their names to her poem, In Praise of Mystery, a poem for Europa. And as you know, that poem is going in space. Well, we just found out that that campaign is up for the prestigious Webby Award for Best Community Engagement. So, since this is Washington, I'd like to have you, just ask you for your vote. We're serious. For her poem and the campaign. And all you have to do is go to vote.webbyawards.com and search for Message in a Bottle. Now, you can also, on your way out tonight, scan a QR code, and there's some signs on your way out, just in case, making it easy. So, now to tonight's celebration. First, we're here to mark the launch of Ada's signature project, including the publication of her anthology, You Are Here, Poetry in the Natural World. Yes, I heard that. Thank you to Daniel Slager, Bailey Hutchinson, and everyone at Milkwood Weed Editions for this beautiful and moving book, and a special shout out to Morgan LaRocca. We really appreciate her. We'd also have to give thanks to Becky Clark, and Amy Hess of the library's publishing office for their great work on this. This is the third Poet Laureate anthology in a row, published in association with the Library of Congress. So we are so pleased with that. And Ada's anthology is the first to feature brand new commissioned poems throughout, which meant some wild deadlines for all. But I think you'll agree that this is a knockout. I also have to mention another of Ada's project initiatives, You Are Here, Poetry in Parks, which will bring her to 7 national parks across the country through the end of the year. So thank you to the National Park Service, especially Clay Hanna and Shauna Pataki, as well as Matt Brogan and Brett Lauer of the Poetry Society of America for turning her dream into a dynamic cross-country reality. And thanks to Judith Maisel for providing additional support for her travel. And I'm going to have everybody clap because I'm saying thank you in Chicago, Judith. Thank you. Now, if we were only celebrating Ada's project and anthology kickoff tonight, that would be enough. But we're also celebrating the gift of Mary Oliver, one of America's most popular and celebrated poets. Back in December, the library received the Mary Oliver Papers manuscript collection from Bill and Amalie Reichblum. They're executors of her estate and members of our James Madison Council. And to complement this new collection, the Reichblums established the Mary Oliver Memorial Event Fund for Emerging Poets. Ms. Oliver asked on her own for a fund to support poets at the beginning of their careers, as she did throughout her life. And tonight, we have 4 of the 52 poets represented in Ada's anthology. They're here to join her and show us all where poetry is going. When I met them backstage, I had to say that at this time, it's more important than ever that we take comfort in words and we see the future. So you will see the future with Ada, with those poets. So Bill and Amalie are here tonight with their son and daughter-in-law. Well, where are they? Would you please stand? Please stand. Yes, they're pointing at you. We want you to stand because we want to thank you for helping us showcase one of America's most essential voices and connect it to the poetry of generations to come. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And finally, a word of thanks for Ada. To be a poet laureate is to be a tireless champion of the art for your community. And to be the U.S. Poet Laureate means you have a lot of people who need you and a lot of ground to cover. Ada has already done so in ways we could not have imagined. Going to space. To a larger part of our country, our world, and our universe than we could have ever dreamed of. And she's not done yet. So please join me in welcoming our 24th Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry, the Poet Laureate of the United States, Ms. Ada Limón.
What a beautiful crowd. It's so good to be with you all. You know, even though I've served in this role for 2 terms now, I still get a little starstruck in this room, and then I get really starstruck around Dr. Carla Hayden. I just feel like we're so lucky to live on the planet where Dr. Carla Hayden is the Librarian of Congress. Yes, I adore her. Before I begin my remarks, and because tonight is such a momentous occasion, I get the true pleasure of not being up here alone, which is a pleasure, I assure you. Tonight is a celebration of the collective power of poetry, and so with that in mind, I'd like to welcome to the stage 4 of my favorite emerging poets writing today: Paul Tran, Analicia Sotelo, Jake Skeets, and Molly McCully Brown. We go 1 over, I think, 1 over. 1 over. And then it's just musical chairs. These are some of my favorite human beings, and all I want to do is just speed through my remarks so I can go hang out with them, but I'm going to take my time and tell you why we're here. Tonight, we are gathered in this beautiful library for a truly historic event. We are launching not 1, but 2 considerable poetic platforms tonight. Tonight marks the first annual Mary Oliver Memorial event at the library. The library has just received Oliver's manuscript collection, and I can't tell you how meaningful it is to know that generations to come will have access to the inspiration and spark that Mary Oliver's work provides us. And tonight, after more than a year and a half of planning and conspiring and Zoom calls and collapsing on the floor and maybe some tears and some emails and staring out the window, we are officially launching my signature project, You Are Here. You Are Here is comprised of two different elements. You Are Here Poetry in the Parks, where in partnership with the National Parks Service and the Poetry Society of America, we are placing poetic installations into 7 different national parks around the country. And this summer and fall, I'll travel to those beloved national parks and unveil those iconic poems. And tonight, we celebrate the other core element of the project, the incredible new anthology, published by Milkweed Editions in partnership with the Library of Congress, You Are Here, Poetry in the Natural World, which is made up, thank you, yes. This book is made up of 50 original contemporary poems that speak back to the natural world at this crucial moment. To launch this project here, after working with so many committed collaborators who have worked tirelessly to see this come to life, is actually really emotional for me, not in short part because many of them are with us here tonight. And before we hear from our wonderful poets this evening, I thought I'd say a little bit about how this project came to be. When I was asked by the Librarian of Congress to come up with a signature project in my term as the 24th Poet Laureate of the United States, I knew I wanted to do something that somehow combined poetry and nature. Because nature and poetry are the two things that have always given me a sense of belonging. When the world has felt harsh, divided, cruel, violent, or even just impossibly lonely, I felt I could seek out my favorite trees, or imagine my creek in my head, or go to the ocean, or just look at that little square of sky between the skyscrapers, and I could feel as if I was connected to something larger, part of something beyond myself. The same was true of poems. Poems have always been there, where I could feel beheld. Even when the world seemed to be saying, I didn't belong, the poem said, you belong. You belong right here. And after many ideas and vision boards, along with Rob Casper from the Library of Congress and the unflappable Von Fielder, and me at some point, and this is not a joke, suggesting that I fly a plane, dropping poems written on native seed packets to reseed deforested lands. That was a hard no. I do think someone should do it, though. We came up with this signature project together called You Are Here. I cannot thank Milkweed Editions and publisher Daniel Slager enough for bringing this beautiful collection to life. I want to thank Becky Clark and everyone at the Library of Congress Publishing Office, and a very special shout out to the poet and editor extraordinaire, Bailey Hutchinson. Simply put, this book would not exist without her keen and generous soul. But before the book, before the parks, before the laureateship even, before my first book, there was already a seed of this project somewhere under the dark soil, already beginning to take root. I still remember arriving to the Cape Cod National Seashore 23 years ago for a fellowship at the Fine Arts Work Center. Earlier that spring, I had graduated from NYU with no idea of how I'd survive as a poet in the city. My choice to choose poetry as a devotion seemed suddenly unwise, to say the least. And then that fall, September 11th happened. And 2 weeks later, I arrived on the furthest tip of Cape Cod and was told to write. Told that the world was my blank page, told that this was the dream, full days of nothing to do but read and write. It was horrible. How was I supposed to write when the world was falling apart? A question I didn't realize then would be something I had to ask myself all the time, again and again. How can a poem even matter in times like these? I was suffering panic attacks, something awful. I couldn't get over the sheer unease of living. And then there was only one thing that seemed to help, getting closer to nature. I'd walk as far as I could most days, a 10-mile round trip to the Long Point Lighthouse. I slowly learned to name and identify plants and animals, eider ducks and gannets and cormorants and the piping plover. Slowly, my heart would calm down and I'd become more able to breathe again. I would practice belonging by naming in the natural world. I could practice being small, disappearing into the world itself, and I discovered a new kind of peace, something that was hard-won, but always there if I noticed enough. It was in Provincetown, Cape Cod, where I heard stories that many poets did these same walks or stared at the same water, and that the goddess of nature poetry herself, Mary Oliver, loved this same landscape. She would even hide pencils in the trees just in case she needed to write something down, and discovered herself without a pencil. Those walks by the ocean, that sitting by the shore and staring at all the small worlds inside the grains of sand, that's how I learned to love the world again. Because even if everything was awful, even when humanity had disappointed me, I could love this tree, this bird diving into the surf from such a great height it felt dangerous. And then, just like that, the bird would come back up. Maybe I could do that too. And so it seems fitting that this project would launch at the same time that the library launches the Mary Oliver Memorial Reading. We were both saved by our love of the natural world, and we both wanted others to feel that way too, to have access to that kind of love that isn't conditional, but instead reciprocal. We love nature, we are nature, and we must love so we can save it and ourselves. And before we get to the original poems read by these brilliant poets, I'd love to open our event with the poem that will be installed at the Cape Cod National Seashore, which is a poem by Mary Oliver. Can you imagine, for example, what the trees do, not only in lightning storms or the watery dark of a summer's night or under the white nets of winter, but now, and now, and now, whenever we're not looking? Surely you can't imagine they don't dance from the root up, wishing to travel a little, not cramped so much as wanting a better view, or more sun, or just as avidly more shade. Surely you can't imagine they just stand there loving every minute of it. The birds, or the emptiness, the dark rings of the years slowly and without a sound thickening, and nothing different unless the wind, and then only in its own mood, comes to visit. Surely you can't imagine patience and happiness like that. Tonight, I want to ask us all to imagine a world of possibilities, a world of healing, a world where we can not only save each other, but we can also save this planet we live on. And now, for the real stars of the show, who to me are as important as the trees themselves, the poets.
It is an enormous pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Molly McCully Brown. This invitation from Ada came, as invitations from Ada so often seem to, at the perfect moment when I had just changed the landscape of my life and was encountering a brand new place and all the awe and strangeness and fear and joy that that can produce. It's called Rabbit Brush. I've never seen the winter at 8,000 feet. Long stands of lodgepole pines, washed white, miles of cliff face, snow-capped and sheer and silvered with lichen, slow herds of mule deer hugging the fence lines, wind-whipped and sure where they're heading. Do the aspens turn yellow before they go bare? There's a stand on the road where I've bought a small house, a red-painted door, some land. What hubris to strike out for somewhere cold enough to kill you, knowing nothing at all. Not even the name of the undergrowth thatching the slope. A neighbor says, rabbit brush, and I should be afraid to be so unprepared. Herdless, human, without instinct for the West. But what comes first is wonder at the word, at having woken someplace new. I once believed I wouldn't see another winter. Ada asked if, in addition to reading one of our own poems from the anthology, we would pick another to read, and it was a crazy task because this anthology is just a book of absolute stunners and delights. But one of the things that I love most about it is that it is a book about the cultivation of joy in the face of what is hard about the world. And this poem is an imagination of what the world could be at its most witchy and delightful and magic and strange. This is Gabrielle Calvresi's An Inn for the Coven. Witch hazel going wild along the walkway, and all the spots to sit and read our spell books, and all the ways to keep them out. 2 black cats and a beaver who eats carrots all day. Every room and upper room, even on the ground floor. And bee boxes in the way back. And the sweet man who comes to keep them. All our loves are witches too, or warlocks. All our children and all our children welcome. Water running in the brook, clean enough to drink from, our hands, and 7 sources and a deep well. All of us and all for those we bring over. 4 swings in the branches, a library in every hollow. And birds. So many birds, we stop trying to name them. We'll just let them be with their own names. Maybe they'll tell us. Porches, tomatoes in the summer and pumpkins in the fall, and curry leaves and curry blossoms, jasmine in the rooms at night. All loves protected. All of us playing cribbage on the lawn. And last, I have the opportunity to read a poem of Mary Oliver's, which is a particular gift for me because I was once a very small child on a college campus in the mountains of Virginia where Mary taught and brought me a horsehair bird's nest out of the woods when I was first falling in love with poems. This is called The Pine Woods. This morning, 2 deer in the pine woods in the 5 a.m. mist, in a silky agitation, went leaping down into the shadows of the bog, and together across the bog and up the hill and into the dense trees. But once, years ago, in some kind of rapturous mistake, the deer did not run away, but walked toward me and touched my hands. And I have been, ever since, separated from my old, comfortable life of experience and deduction. I have been, ever since, exalted. And now, though I am estranged from the world, I would not go back. I would not be anywhere else but stalled in the happiness of the miracle. Every morning, I stroll out into the fields. I believe in everything. I believe in anything. Even if the deer are wild again, I am still standing under the dark trees. They are still walking toward me.
And I'm Jake Skeets. Panelists, it's an honor to share the stage with you. Ada, thank you for inviting us. And to the audience, ahalane shike shidene do shitra asilko yate, which in English means I'm greeting you individually, one by one, and the word hello just doesn't have that energy. The first poem I'm going to read for you tonight is my own, and it's called If Fire. If Fire. I already messed up. Let me start over. If Fire. River brush float on the Rio Grande in very little water. To the north, a sleeper fire, holdover from last season's wilds, bust sprout, flame crawl, the moon mistaken for a hole in the sky. If next world, steel deer soften into field, 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 meadowhawk, rodent nests, overgrown undergrowth, all tinder is white space. Its span a mirror, your mouth around light. The next poem I'm going to read for you is called Bad Wolf by Laureate. And when I was choosing a poem, of course I had to choose a native poet, and of course I had to choose a poem by an indigenous woman, because without indigenous women, me sitting here would not be possible. So this poem is called Bad Wolf. I husk the houses from the land, each one as similar in size and shape as their battered crates behind the shipping store. The lake wasn't here with its jagged edges and dikes puffing like keloid scars, so I drink it. I uninvite to receive more clearly what the fringed prairie might have been, with its controlled burns and bone games and berries. In language class, I am learning the story of the wolf who is perpetually punished for his bullyish pride, made to pursue a hornet nest and drown in his own reflection, snout gleaming with the honey he was hoping to bite. I repeat phrases and parse pauses from stresses. The markers I seek are nearly impossible to find. What is under this water, and what was once water? Here, where a trail once crossed, people gathered, then the hop farmers dug axe heads and projectile points, still bearing the scar from the plow. Within 5 miles, the battles of the first treaty wars are under barns and soccer goals and signs allowing recreational drone flying. At the prairie, a solitary Douglas firs, high branches start well above my head, telling me it was once one of many. I must move the tendons of my chin and hold my tongue differently to string together the consonants of my language. To say wolf, I have to open my lips in a pantomime of alarm. Thank you. And the last poem is from Mary Oliver, and it's a short poem, and it's called After Reading Lucretius, I Go to the Pond. The slippery green frog that went to his death in the heron's pink throats was my small brother. And the heron with the white plumes like a crown on his head, who is washing now his great sword beak in the shining pond, is my tall, thin brother. My heart dresses in black and dances.
Well, I had my poem ready to go, and I just lost it. Right. So this piece, I'm Analicia Sotelo, and this piece is about my grandfather, who's a veteran and loved this one part of Texas, and I grew to love it and him, and this is about us. Quemado, Texas. My grandfather vanished into the land of the Yellow Jackets, swerving in their upper kingdoms. The land of the rattlers, ensconced in the cool of a wide, flat rock. The dry land, where the grass is laden with a hungry hue, and the mesquites know their time to burn is coming. My grandfather's outline is at the welding station. The butterflies in cream and marigold accost the air with a sentient beauty. The boots he wore harbor spiders in the living room, and his red paisley bandana, cured with sweat, calls the riverline to attention. Today is a rare day. I have finally had the courage to tell him what the sky said to me all those years ago, that I am bound to its bloodline, though I can never know its true body. That I am, in essence, a peacock, neither native nor foreign, just an iridescence doing what nature demands. What a bunch of baloney, I hear him say, with his signature humor, like a splash of grenadine, as the sun pours its gold silt throughout the valley. And then this is also a lovely poem by Paul Guest, another grandfather poem. Walking the land. Because I was terrified, I learned nothing. I had stepped in a papery nest of ground wasps. A hateful swarm of them wreathed up around me and writhed and sang wordless rage. One stung me on the neck, and I think I was shocked more than I was hurt, afraid of moving even an inch because that was what the world had become. I wonder if its frantic sting was death for the insect whose mind was all red. I don't know my mind, so I'm making up a story, whistling past a graveyard. Something about a goose, forever honking and charging, flogging, flying. My grandfather there, and muscadines in the Georgia heat. My grandfather smoked Winstons, and what could be more American than choosing one's future decline? He broke one part in his palm, spat into it, and smeared the poultice over my angry skin. Would you call it a wound? I asked a doctor, because there are hurts that mean so little. I want to say nothing imprecise. I want to stand like I could then, in the pine shade of those trees, and not fill up with murky nausea, soothed by some nicotine. This will help, my grandfather said. Like magic, you wait and see. And then this is the poem Clamming by Mary Oliver. I rise by lamplight and hurry out to the bay where the gulls, like white ghosts, swim in the shallows. I rake and rake down to the gray stones, the clenched quahogs, the dead-weight fruits of the sea that bear inside their walls a pink and salty one-lunged life. We are all one family, but love ourselves best. Later, I sit on the dawn-soaked shore and set a thin blade into the slightly hissing space between the shells and slash through the crisp life muscle. I put what is in the shell into my mouth, and when the gulls come begging, I feed them too. How detailed and hopeful, how exact everything is in the light on the rippling sand, at the edge of the turning tide, its upheaval, its stunning proposal, its black, anonymous roar. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Tran. I grew up a child of refugees and queer, trans, first to go to college, and I thought I didn't need anybody, and I had to do things by myself. And I didn't realize until I met you how much I needed you. And so thank you for being my teacher and chosen family and gathering us here. Tonight, my poem is called Terroir.
Oh, is the mic not working?
Tonight, my poem is called Terroir. Below the willows, while they wept, the sun swept its faceless face down the edge of the river. Ducklings tailed the twilight light, vanishing quickly toward the horizon where it seemed even truth and beauty vanished. Below the darkness, darkening quickly still, the bees mistook for forsythia and tulips the lips of paper cups, trembling, nearly toppling in the evening wind, half filled with wine from the cliffs of a country far away where the monks, having day after day tasted the soil and the rain, insisted the grapes contained in each form the memory of the land and the hands that remade them. The monks, without doubt, thought we took this memory into our form, into our body and mind, willfully, though rarely ever willingly, revised and night after night devised from an idea, the seed of it. They thought we could taste and experience everything had been and been through. Did you? I've begun to believe the present, like the shadows on the water, twisting, doesn't have to be a form the past took. The past has taken so much. Must there be more to give back, to get on or away from this? My memory moored me. Lifting now my cup to yours, my eyes to yours, and the light cast by the dark. I don't know if I can be known like that. Fresh snow, clouds of smoke, flight without wings, tower, kings, demanding another story, another dawn, sleepless, dawning another little death, hooves of death I could not stop for, running through me until I was run through, laid like a feather blade, raw and bloodied blade made sharp by a throat. From that eternity, I found my way here, less because and more in spite of, to spite the lands and the hands I've been dealt. Soil, rain, wind, blazing and billowing like the cloak a saint must have worn to put out a candle in a cathedral that will burn. My spirit persisted despite resistance. How could I let the past be fused perpetually inside me? Sure, maybe it's true, and I'm just too selfish, wanting all the credit, to savor the beauty of not having saved myself entirely by myself. Will you look at that? Our cups are empty. Here. Let's see. Trembling. I think all my life I've carried the unfulfilled lives and dreams of the people I loved, and I thought that gave me purpose, and at some point it was really crushing to live underneath their lives and dreams, and I was looking for a reason to live. And then this book came in the mail with a poem by Ruth Awad called Reasons to Live. Because if you can survive the violet night, you can survive the next. And the fig tree, it will ache with sweetness for you in sunlight that arrives first at your window, quietly pawing even when you can't stand it. And you will heavy the whining floorboards of the house you filled with animals as hurt and lost as you, and the bearded irises will form fully in their roots, their golden manes swaying with the want of spring. Live. One day, you'll put your hands in the earth and understand an afterlife isn't promised. But the spray of scorpion grass keeps growing, and the dogs will sing their whole bodies in praise of you, and the red buds will lay down their pink crowns, and the rivers will set their stones and ribbons at your door, if only you'll let the world soften you with its touching. And now one for Mary. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locusts, equally the beech, the oaks and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me. And daily, I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches and they call out again. It's simple, they say. You too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light and to shine. Thank you.
What did I say? Right? I just have to recover. This is sort of everything that I've ever dreamed of right here. And I can't tell you that my favorite thing to do in the world is to be read to and to be able to listen. And I know that a lot of my life is being the person on the stage, and it is just such a gift to hear these incredible poets read in their own voices, and it's I'm a little emotional. But I was joking with these poets earlier that I was just going to ask with some easy questions, some softball questions. One of them just like, let's just define poetry, and then afterwards we'll define nature. And they were like, they started laughing, and I was like, no, what if I really asked that? But I'm not going to ask that. I'm just going to say that one of the reasons I love talking about poetry and nature is that you actually cannot define them, and that you can put some of the best minds together, and everyone will say, well, nature is this, and poetry is this, and that will be a discussion that we would never end. And I'm hoping it will never end, and that I will continue to have that conversation with you guys forever. But I do want to ask a question, which is, because it's on my mind, the idea of the nature poem. And I know for myself that when I first started writing, there was moments where I was like, well, I would never want to be a nature poet, or I would never, just sort of never wanted a box to define me, or whatever that was. And yet I think that the nature poem is changing. I think it's changing now. I think it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this anthology, is that I do think this is a time for a sort of new nature poem. But I was wanting just to hear your thoughts on that. And anyone can speak in any order, but just any thoughts on whether or not you think you write nature poems, and if you consider yourself a nature poet, or what is your relationship with that phrase? It's so fun. It's so fun to be the person that gets to ask the questions. They're never going to talk to me again after this.
I can see something. I feel a little, when we talk about, what is the nature poem? What is a nature poem? The way I feel when someone says, what is it to write a poem of the body, or a narrative of the body, which is, every poem is a nature poem because every poem occurs in the world, right? And occurs, somewhere between the built and the natural environment. And it feels like sort of one of the great gifts of my life that I have made a home in so many landscapes, and one of the great tensions of my life that the realities of my body are often in sort of conflict or in tension with those landscapes and in the world. And every poem I write, and maybe more importantly, every poem I love, feels rooted at that intersection.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful.
I feel like poetry is such an interesting, at least a poem is an interesting space in that it can handle a lot of history, of linguistics, of politics, right? And so when we throw in nature, right, we sort of like add that to the mix. I feel like it is the perfect platform of trying to reconcile and move through our relationships with nature and the world around us, because it can handle so many different things. It has that space to do so, where I feel like other forms of media and mediums don't necessarily have that kind of mystery, or they don't allow us to have thoughts that could be momentary. Right, my answer right now could change tomorrow, and that's perfectly fine, right? Yeah. Just like you said, the conversation continues, and poetry has space for it. Poetry has room for it. Poetry is almost like a kind of wind or force, right? That Mary Oliver talks about in her papers up there. That it's a thing we move with and move against sometimes, even. And I feel like poetry is that kind of conglomerate of all those things pressed onto a page.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, okay, yeah. It's perfect. Beautiful answer, beautiful answer.
I'll throw out a few thoughts. I feel like when people say, are you a nature poet, or do you write about your grandfather, or do you write about love? There's always this kind of, I feel like, trend and insularity and exclusivity among artistic circles. Or like, for example, at one point, figurative art versus conceptual art, right? And to me, a lot of that is about the sort of ego of this individual genius. And what nature has taught me is that it's really not about me at all.
Yeah.
At any point, I could be with the little worms doing their thing in the dirt, and there's a nobility to that. And so I think anytime I hear that, I just think, you're quite particular. You might be a little bit more exclusive about this. And when you can discover stuff instead of make a statement about yourself, when you can discover who you are through nature, it's magical, and you grow and you're connected to people, and that's the higher part of life to me.
Yeah, oh, I completely agree with that. Yes, thank you.
I think coming up, I was told that as a queer and trans poet of color, if I did not show mastery, then I was not a real poet. And at the same time, I was told that poetic form and technique did not belong to me, that the history of poetry did not belong to me, and that specifically nature poems did not belong to me. And I think there are many people who would sleep so comfortably at night with both eyes closed if I continued to believe that. And it is really, I think, important to remember that years before a small group of people in this part of the world decided how much of a person other people were, or that people like us did not have souls or brains or original thoughts, that Phyllis Wheatley was writing her poems long before Thomas Jefferson signed his name on the Declaration. And when the same people would like to remind me that nature poems are bucolic or written by Virgil or Georgics, I'd like to ask them, who was outside? Who was forced to be outside, writing poems outside, and who got to live in cities? Nature poems have always been informed, shaped by class, race, gender, sexuality, imperialism. And I think the fact that your name is on this book is something more radical than could be fathomed right now.
Thank you, baby. These brilliant, brilliant souls. I feel like very similarly to all of everything that you guys said, which was this idea also of access to it, right? That there was an idea of like who gets to write the nature poem, who has access to time and space, who, who gets to go to the mountaintop and have the epiphany, right? Who has time for the epiphany? And I think that there's a lot of that work when we talked about putting together this book. It was like, how do we come up with the response to this moment? And in the original ask, I said, just speak back to the natural world. It doesn't have to be, it's whatever, but I would like a location. If there's something that there's a location. But that could be the body, it could be whatever it wanted. And then these poems came in, and as I put together this manuscript, it was so beautiful because I printed them all out, and you guys still do this, right? You print everything out, everything on the kitchen table and then on the floor, and I just realized that what we were making together, all of these poems were speaking to each other. And you didn't know, you didn't know everyone who was on the list. I wrote everybody individually, and yet all these poems came together, and I was like, oh, we have made a forest. Like, this is a real living thing. And all of these moments and all of these lyrical, little moves and every little thing is suddenly speaking together and really making and reminding me about the power of the collective. Which felt so necessary for me as I was making the project. And so I guess I want to ask you about the idea of this moment in particular, right? Because when we talk about the history of the nature poem, we talk about access, of course, and identity. And then there's also, right now, that we have never been in a moment that we are in at this time at our planet, on our planet. And so I was wondering if you have thought about the nature poem shifting in any way. And if you can see that change not only in your own work or maybe in the work of others.
I can start. Yeah. I think for me, I'm definitely seeing poets, myself included, really question the project of a book.
Yeah.
Right? So when we have to, I feel like as poets and as writers, we're producing and publishing books, and those books themselves require gallons and gallons of water, right? Mm-hmm. And when we're living in this day and age, when climate change is no longer just the thing that people are talking about at some distant future, it's a mm-hmm. thing that we are living currently today, I feel like the project of the book has to shift, right? And there was a long conversation on poetry Twitter, or formerly, I don't know, what the app, and about the project book, or the conceptual book, or the book that is not just a collection of poems, mm-hmm. But is a collection of thought and thinking, and the poems are moving and blending across the pages. And you can tell that there's an extreme amount of attention being brought then to how the poems are moving within that space. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm very interested in a poet's decision to move on to the next page, mm-hmm. to carry a poem onto the next page, to enter blank space, to enter white space, to put a photograph in there, to step so largely away from the left margin that the entire book now has to shift into landscape mode, right? And I think of poets like Anthony Cody, Dami Che, who are sort of like working around nature, within nature, the politics of land and body, and really trying to sort of push this idea of poetry across to a general readership, right? And for me, that kind of intentional thinking about the book and the poem is where I see the nature poem moving us toward.
Yeah, oh, that's really beautiful. I don't think I've actually thought about that in that particular way, and I love that insight, because I think there is something to be said for, it's not just the poem itself, but the poetics of the moment. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking that in a lot of poems about nature, nature is put up as this metaphor for survival. Mm-hmm. And so, we talk about flowers coming back. Was it trees that will only regenerate when they are burned? Mm-hmm. And yet what happens when parts of our ecosystem do not survive because of how we treat it? Right. And so can we still look to nature as a sign of survival if we have mistreated it so much that it cannot survive? Right. And then I think about how often in those cycles change is already built in. So through the seasons, right, flowers wilt and then they come back. And so is it actually a sign of survival if the change is already built in? Mm-hmm. And for a lot of young organizers and activists, sometimes we feel so enthralled when the system of power offers us what it is we've asked for. Mm-hmm. But is it victory if they've already decided, already sort of co-opted the change that we were looking for? Mm-hmm. And so I think the nature poem, there's a way that we have, through confirmation bias, made the nature poem what we wanted it to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about what nature might say, like, if we stop trying to poeticize it so much and really just, like Mary Oliver says, like, listen, pay attention.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful as well, because I feel like when I think about the natural world, right? A lot of times, a lot of poems are about like going into the natural world to find peace. And that's what we see the snowy, beautiful, landscape, or we see this sort of, gorgeous time where someone goes in and finds like, oh, this is where I will breathe. And even though nature is like that for me, there are also moments where I'm like, yeah, a hurricane is also nature, right? That there is just the destruction of nature, that there is a force too. And I feel like sometimes when we talk about the nature poem, We do forget that element, that there is also this level in which nature is its own thing that cannot be contained. And even when we try to pin parts of it on the page, you know, it's beyond us in its own power. It is us, and so therefore swallows us.
I think that, you know, you talk about nature as a force, nature as a swallowing thing, nature as a destructive thing. And I think the other thing that's happening right now in the work of the poets who are writing about the environment in the way that I find most urgent and wonderful and difficult is the grappling with the fact that nature is also a thing that we are infringing upon, ruining, wrecking, you know. And so I'm thinking about, you know, poets like Claire Wamenholm, right, or even Amy Zucca-Matado in her new work, who are grappling with what does it mean to be moving through a world, be expressing gratitude, be expressing joy, be expressing care, and also understand that just the very fact of our existence is a threat to some of what we are praising, what we are grateful for. And I think that question, right, what does it mean to inhabit a world in which we are, all of us, inherently doing damage, some of us much more than others, some of us, all of us here, engaged in the project of trying to curtail that damage, correct that damage, be some force in sort of recompense against that damage. How do you be alive right now, understanding that as the project?
Yeah, I love that because I think that's so very true. And I think it's one of the reasons that for me, poetry is the perfect place to talk about these things because it holds so much. It makes room for grief. It makes room for despair. It makes room for the questioning, the curiosity of what it is to be alive at this moment. And yet it still makes room for beauty and praise and wonder and awe, which we need so much in order to allow ourselves a sense of joy, a sense of wonder, a sense of belonging. So it feels like it can do all of those things. And maybe not one poem will do all of those things, but one poem here does this, one poem here does this. And it feels like it's the right time to have a form speaking back to the natural world that is in some ways against answers at all, but instead just exists in the questions. Yeah, I love that.
I'll say a little something.
Yeah.
We were talking about sort of evolution, stuff like that. One of my favorite poets, Daniel Borzatsky. And this is sort of something I've seen in nature poems as well as a kind of apocalyptic fascination. But what I'm really interested in, especially in his work, but also sometimes in my practice, is have we evolved to sort of want to destroy ourselves? Like the kind of tough questions that it makes me ask about our humanity, and how are we complicit or not complicit, and how are we in control or not in control? And most of the time, it's all of those things at once. And I think poetry lets us, to a certain extent, it's comforting because it's like, okay, I'm not perfect, I'm human, trying to learn new things, but it also forces you to face yourself and not pretend like, you know, you're just outraged at the world, right? It makes you go, oh, this is also me.
Yeah.
And so that's what I appreciate about it.
I love that so much because I think that one of the things that I keep sort of pushing against is that this idea of the apocalypse or the idea of the surrender, because I actually think that's the easiest thing to do, is to give up. And I think that the harder thing is to recognize that we have the tools, you know, that we have this moment. And I think it's really important to do the good work and have the big discussions. And I don't think that technology is going to save us. I don't even know if thinking is going to save us. But I think feeling is going to really help us along and point us in the right direction. And I feel like when I turn to poetry, a lot of that is that we need an opening, a dislodging, a tenderness to the world so that we can actually have a reciprocal relationship with what we love. So I find it so fascinating and the important work you guys are doing. I mean, I just admire you all so much. I know that Rob wants to, we're going to have a few questions from the audience, I believe, and which I haven't done in a while. I haven't done a Q&A for the audience for a while. So I'll just start thinking about your questions. And I will say this, that when we're talking about the nature poem, I do want you to consider perhaps maybe making a nature poem of your own. This book is called You Are Here, and it had really one prompt, which was, what would you write to the landscape around you? And if you have never written a poem before, then it could be in prose. If you want to write that, you can share it. There's a hashtag. It's You Are Here Poetry. But you can also, write it and bury it in the backyard. I write a lot of poems that never see the light of day, and I am absolutely fine with that. I would encourage people here today, since it is National Poetry Month and National Earth Month, to think about writing back to the world in some ways. And I think that it's it's a good time to do that, to sort of ignite the brain in that way, and the heart in that way. And so do we have any, I'll open it up to the audience. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. We have mics right in the front. If anyone has a question they'd like to ask, we have time for just a few. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Max. Thank you so much for being here. I think this is a time that is so marked by grief, and I think some of the best nature poems are ones that see nature as a vessel for grief and also a map towards healing. And I would love to hear about how maybe reading or writing or compiling nature poems has transformed how you've experienced grief yourselves in your lives.
I'll answer for just, happy to hear what everyone else has to say, but just putting together this particular anthology was one of the things that was so beautiful to me, was that there was so much in conversation with one another. And that I do think it's really important to feel like we're not alone right now. That there's so many different, that everyone's feeling a lot of different ways about where we are in the world. And I felt like it was important to witness that and to make room for that. And putting together this anthology really reminded me of that we aren't alone in these big, complicated feelings, and that they are complicated. And that to me was actually really inspirational, because I think I need to be reminded of the collective power, Anyone else want to speak to that?
I started writing about my elderly dog, and that was kind of how I started getting into writing poems about nature. Her level of attention to the world just stirred me, and I know, of course, Mary Oliver was also a lover of dogs. But as I was sort of processing my grief, I didn't know I would write about nature. It kind of just showed up, and that's what's kind of so magical about it. And I don't know how much it made me feel like I was sort of honoring a landscape that I didn't entirely understand, but at least it was on paper and it was living somewhere.
Yeah,
so
I love that.
Go ahead and over there.
Yeah, hi. My name is Bruce Jacobs. First, I want to thank every one of you for being here and for your work.
Oh, thank
and
you.
I want to thank you for pulling this together. This is amazing.
Thank you.
I just want to say that, first of all, I'm more grateful than I can say to my friend who's sitting right up there, Janine, who brought me here, I think without knowing that I am a poet who is in the middle of writing a memoir about being black in the natural world.
Wow.
As a sort of rebuttal to the most unnatural kind of narrative of being as a black man that you can imagine. And so it's like being in church to hear you testify to that. And I want to thank all of you to that, but I want to ask you about process. Because for me, a lot of what I bring when I sit down is just something that I can then respond to.
Yeah.
Just something that puts something in the air so that the rest of me can say, yes, no, I don't know, no, forget that, let's go somewhere else, let's do. And I wonder what it's like for you. I used to imagine that I used to be a late night person, and now I'm too old to be a late night person because I fall asleep. And I have things that I need drugs for, so I wake up really early. So now I've discovered, wow, morning, and it's amazing. But I have stuff already there that then propels me into a space of discovery. And I wonder what your process is like and how that works for you, whether you're writing about how nature brings you and what you bring to nature, or whether you're writing about anything else.
Yeah.
Thank you again for your
Yeah,
work. And
thank
for
you.
this.
Thank you for that question. Anyone else?
I think for me, most of my poems are just constellations of individual moments of my life. My poems always start from a single line or image or something that just is inspired by the world around me that I'll pick up because I'm listening and observing to the world around me. This poem, If Fire, started with the word holdover fire or sleeper fire, which I had never heard of. But one day I was folding laundry and the news was on in the background, and they were talking about a sleeper fire that had started in northern New Mexico that had taken after that people thought it subsided, but it was just holdover from the last season's wildfires, and it was literally just basically sleeping underground and then sprout back up. So that moment, I had to sort of take out my phone, write down the word sleeper fire, and then the poem If Fire came out as a response to that.
I love that.
I love that you used the word discovery. I think of my process as a poetics of discovery, in large part because when I consider how folks like myself have not been allowed access to our humanity, said we don't have a soul, can't be original, the idea that I discovered something rebukes that and proves my humanity. And if the poem is a mind at work, my voice is now in the reader's mind. And I don't know, lately I've been thinking about how to do, how oftentimes folks like myself are tasked to do impossible things for the people we love. And I was watching this episode of Nova, shout out PBS, about like the first plants. And I had no idea that they started out as cells in thermal gutters. And that when they were algae still in the water, didn't know how to get up on land. And in a process of, they called it intimate association with fungi. The fungi were like, hello. We need food, and you have photosynthesis, but you want to be on that rock? And so they made this impossible thing, unimaginable thing happen. But they didn't do it alone. There was no way they could have done it, either of them, alone. And so I realized, I don't know, that was something that I discovered nature taught me, is impossible things actually cannot be done by one person.
I love that. That's really beautiful.
Anybody else? I think so.
No, that's beautiful.
Just to the last question, I want to say too, before we end, there is that QR code outside that we hope you scan, and we hope you vote for Message in a Bottle. Also, we're right next to the Woodall Pavilion. All of the poets will be signing, so we hope you get an anthology. It's for sale. We hope you buy their books and bring them in to get them signed. So you, last question, please.
What's the hardest part of making a poem?
That is such a great question. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I think for me, the hardest part of making the poem is trying to say something that surprises me and that is true, but also say it in a way that feels as if I've never heard it before. So it's something that's completely unique for me. It's not just a thought that I've had, but, oh, this poem is suddenly teaching me something. And that's hard because there's a lot of things that we know, right? And so it's usually when I'm suddenly surprised, like, oh, that just taught me something. And when the poem does that, that's when I think, oh, okay, I've got the poem. But it is the hardest part because it doesn't always happen. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you to Ada, our U.S. Poet Laureate, and thank you to Molly, Jake, Analicia, and Paul. Thanks to all of you.